The cameras flashed as Yaman entered the studio, his black suit perfectly tailored, his expression unreadable. The moment he sat down, the room fell silent. Everyone knew, this wasn't going to be just another interview. This was the one everyone had been waiting for. For months, fans had been speculating about his future. Would he stay in Italy? Would he go back to Turkey? Would he finally speak about the rumors surrounding his personal life and career? But no one expected the direction this interview would take. As the host began with polite questions about his projects and international success, Ken answered calmly, professional, composed. But the shift came when the topic turned to his past. The interviewer asked softly, "Do you ever think about going back?" Ken's eyes lifted slightly. For a brief moment, something flickered behind them, a mix of nostalgia, sadness, and something else. "If I ever return to Turkey," he began slowly, "it won't be for the reason people think." The room went still. Everyone, including the crew, seemed to hold their breath. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. There was weight in his tone, a truth he hadn't shared before. He leaned back slightly, gathering his thoughts. "I've changed. The world sees success, but success doesn't always mean happiness. Sometimes, leaving isn't running away, it's choosing peace." Fans watching from around the world immediately sensed the deeper meaning. Social media exploded within minutes. "He's talking about Demet. This is his way of saying he misses home. He finally admitted it, he's not happy abroad." But Ken continued. "Fame gives you everything, attention, money, recognition. But it also takes something you can never buy back, sincerity. People forget who you really are." The host leaned forward, sensing the vulnerability in his voice. "So, are you saying you miss what you left behind?" Ken smiled faintly. "I miss the person I used to be before all of this. Before everything became a headline." It wasn't the kind of answer that could be twisted into gossip, yet it carried more emotion than any tabloid story ever had. Later in the interview, he added something that no one saw coming. "Sometimes, you build a new life to escape your old one, and then realize that the person you ran from is still inside you." It was raw. Real. And for the first time, fans saw the man behind the fame, not the actor, not the celebrity, but the human being who had been trying to rebuild himself far from the noise. When the host asked what's next for him, Ken paused again. "The truth," he said quietly. "The next chapter isn't about where I go, it's about who I become." Those words would echo across the internet for days, sparking thousands of discussions, interpretations, and emotional reactions. Because everyone knew. This wasn't just an interview. It was a confession. The morning after the interview, it felt like the entire internet had woken up talking about one thing, Yaman's confession. Major news outlets in Turkey, Italy, and Spain splashed his quote across their headlines, "If I ever return, it won't be for the reason you think." Clips of his emotional tone spread like wildfire. Fan pages replayed every moment, every gesture, every sigh. There was a heaviness in his words, a kind of quiet heartbreak that only comes from speaking the truth after holding it in for too long. On social media, theories exploded. Some believed he was preparing to return to Turkish television after years abroad. Others were certain it had to do with Demet Özdemir, the woman whose name never seemed to leave his story, and some simply said, "He looks tired of pretending he's happy." But then came the shock. An insider from Ken's close circle shared that this wasn't just a random interview. It had been planned for months, a chance for him to finally control his narrative after years of tabloids twisting it. Ken wanted to speak on his own terms, the source revealed. He wanted to show people that behind the fame, there's still a person, a man who's been fighting to find peace. That's when fans began noticing something they hadn't seen in years: sincerity. He wasn't promoting a project or teasing a new role. He was just talking about life, about change, about the price of success. Meanwhile, the Turkish media couldn't stay silent. Talk shows replayed the footage endlessly, dissecting every sentence. One journalist said, "You can tell he's not speaking about work. There's emotion there, something unresolved." And just like that, the phrase "something unresolved" became a trend. People began posting montages of Can and Demet from their old series, with emotional music and captions like, "Some stories never end, they just go silent." But behind the scenes, there was more. His management confirmed that Can had recently turned down 2 major international projects. No official reason was given. Fans began connecting the dots. Could his next move be something closer to home? A few days later, during a live radio show in Italy, the host asked him directly. "After that interview, people believe you might be preparing something new. Are they right?" Can smiled faintly. "Let's just say," he replied, "the future isn't about starting over, it's about returning to what truly matters." That single line sent fans into a frenzy. Returning. The word echoed everywhere. Was he hinting at Turkey? At love? At something, or someone, left behind? Every post, every word, every silence from him became part of a puzzle that millions tried to solve. But one thing was certain, this interview had changed everything. It wasn't about fame anymore. It wasn't about promotion. It was about truth, raw, emotional truth that had been buried for too long, and that's why people couldn't stop watching it, replaying it, feeling it, because behind every frame, behind every quiet smile, there was a story that still hadn't reached its ending. For days, the media storm refused to calm. Every network wanted a piece of the mystery. What exactly did Yaman mean when he said his future wasn't about where, but who he'd become? Paparazzi waited outside his apartment in Rome, fans lined up near his gym, and entertainment programs across Europe dissected his every word like a national secret. Then, the speculation took a sharper turn. The Turkish magazine claimed that Can's manager had flown to Istanbul for private meetings with 2 production studios. The headline screamed, "Is Yaman planning a return to Turkish television?" Another outlet contradicted it hours later, insisting that the trip was strictly personal. But what really fueled the fire was Demet Özdemir's silence. She hadn't commented on the interview, not even a subtle reaction, and that silence was louder than any response. Yet fans noticed one thing. 3 days after Can's emotional statement, Demet unfollowed a few entertainment pages that had mocked their past relationship. Then, she posted a black and white photo of herself looking out a rainy window, captioned simply, "Peace isn't a place. It's a person." That was all it took. The internet went wild. "She's talking about him again. This is too specific to be random. She's still connected, they both are." Meanwhile, Can's manager released a short statement, trying to calm the chaos. Yaman is currently reviewing several opportunities both in Europe and Turkey. Nothing has been confirmed yet. He appreciates the love and support from all fans. But that statement did the opposite. It fueled even more curiosity because the words "both in Europe and Turkey" hinted that something big might be on the horizon. In Italy, TV presenters debated what this meant for his acting career. In Turkey, people were already predicting a massive comeback, maybe a series, maybe a movie, or perhaps something far more personal. Then, one journalist from a Spanish entertainment site reported something that no one expected. During a closed interview after his press conference, when asked about his next chapter, Can smiled and said, "Sometimes, your future has to meet your past, only then you know where you truly belong." Those words ignited everything again. His fans flooded the comment sections with emotional messages, some begging him to return home, others warning him not to reopen old wounds. But everyone agreed on one thing: something inside him had shifted. He wasn't running anymore. He wasn't hiding behind fame, roles, or distance. He was speaking from a place of honesty that people weren't used to seeing from celebrities, and perhaps that's what made this moment so powerful, because behind all the interviews, the headlines, and the speculation, it was clear that Yaman was preparing for something life-changing, not just in his career, but in his heart. As weeks passed, Yaman's silence became louder than any headline. He stopped appearing at public events, turned down interviews, and even limited his social media posts. For someone who had always lived under the flash of cameras, this sudden quietness was unsettling and telling, but those who knew him closely said he was in a transitional phase. He was no longer chasing fame, he was searching for meaning. One of his Italian friends reportedly told a local magazine, "Can isn't the same man he was a year ago. He's more reflective now. He talks a lot about home, about things he left behind, about unfinished business. That phrase, unfinished business, immediately caught attention. Turkish media picked it up and spun it into 1,000 theories. Some claimed he was planning to reunite with a Turkish production company for a new drama. Others believed he was preparing to spend more time in Istanbul, away from cameras. But a growing number of fans felt something deeper, that the unfinished business wasn't professional at all. Then came a surprising clue. One morning, paparazzi captured a moment that instantly went viral. Yaman at Istanbul airport, arriving quietly with minimal security. No red carpet, no announcement, just a man returning to his roots wearing a plain black hoodie, baseball cap, and sunglasses. He walked quickly through the terminal. But even under disguise, fans recognized him immediately. Screams filled the air. "Can. Welcome home. We missed you." He smiled briefly, waved once, and disappeared into a waiting car. Within hours, the internet was ablaze again. #CanYaman back home trended worldwide, and fans flooded social media with speculation. Some believed he was back for a secret filming project. Others insisted it was personal, that maybe he needed to face the ghosts he'd left behind. But something was different this time. There was no PR campaign, no announcement, no sponsors. It wasn't the glamorous return of a celebrity, it was the quiet homecoming of a man trying to reconnect with his past. He didn't go straight to a hotel or an event. According to multiple eyewitnesses, his car drove toward the Üsküdar district, where he used to spend time before fame consumed his life. That area had memories, private ones, coffee shops where he had once laughed with friends. Streets where no one cared who he was. A small seaside cafe he had visited countless times during the filming of Erkenci Kus, and maybe that cafe wasn't the only place holding memories, because later that evening, Turkish tabloids claimed that Demet Özdemir had been seen leaving a quiet restaurant nearby, just an hour after Can's car was spotted in the area. Neither of them confirmed anything. Neither denied it, but for their fans, who had followed this story for years, that was enough. The idea of both of them being in the same city, possibly crossing paths again after years apart, was enough to reignite every emotion, every hope, every what if that had ever existed between them. And suddenly, Can's words from that famous interview began to make sense. "If I ever return to Turkey, it won't be for the reason you think." He hadn't come back for work. He hadn't come back for fame. He had come back for something, or someone, that had never truly left his heart. That night, Istanbul seemed to hold its breath. The streets shimmered with soft rain, the Bosphorus whispered quietly, and the city that had once witnessed their love now waited to see if destiny would allow one final encounter. Yaman had always said that he believed in timing, that life brings people together only when they're ready to face the truth. And perhaps, this was his time. According to a few witnesses, he visited the small seaside cafe in Üsküdar. The same one where he and Demet had often sat during breaks from filming. The place had barely changed, the same chairs, the same smell of coffee mixed with sea breeze, the same view that seemed endless. He sat by the window, ordered a Turkish tea, and just watched the rain fall. Those who saw him said he looked peaceful, but there was something in his eyes, a deep, quiet emotion, the kind that comes only when you're standing face to face with your past. Then, without warning, a familiar figure entered the cafe. No cameras, no entourage, just a woman in a beige coat, her hair tucked under a scarf. She hesitated at the door, scanning the room, and when her eyes met his, time simply stopped. It was Demet. For a moment, neither of them moved. The years apart, the distance, the unspoken words, all of it seemed to collapse into that one silent gaze. Ken stood up slowly, unsure whether to smile or to speak first. Demet took a hesitant step closer, her voice trembling. "You really came back?" He nodded gently, a faint smile playing on his lips. "I told you I might." They sat down, facing each other once again, two people who had shared everything and lost it all to time and circumstance. There were no accusations, no apologies. Just truth, the kind that doesn't need to be spoken aloud. "I saw your interview," she finally said. "Everyone's talking about it." He looked at her and replied softly, "I wasn't talking to everyone." The silence that followed was heavier than any confession. Because in that moment, they both knew, those words had been for her. Demet smiled faintly, eyes glistening. And now that you're here, what happens next? Ken exhaled slowly, looking out toward the water. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. I didn't come back to fix the past, I came to understand it. She nodded, a tear sliding down her cheek. You always said you hated goodbyes. He smiled. That's why I stopped saying them. They didn't need more words. Sometimes, closure doesn't come in big speeches, it comes in the quiet, in the knowing, in the peace of finally being in the same place without pain. As dawn began to rise, Demet stood up to leave. Take care of yourself, she whispered. Ken smiled, looking up at her one last time. I will. And this time? I mean it. She walked away, and he didn't stop her. Because love doesn't always mean holding on, sometimes, it means letting the past breathe freely again. Later that week, during a short appearance on Italian TV, the host asked Ken about his trip to Turkey. He smiled, calm, sincere, peaceful. You know, he said, sometimes your future isn't something you build, it's something you return to. And when you find it, you just know you're home. And that was it. No further explanation. No denial. No drama. Just truth. Simple, beautiful, and heartbreaking. Because for Yaman, the real reason he came back to Turkey wasn't fame, wasn't work, wasn't even closure. It was love, the kind that time can never erase, and distance can never silence. If I ever return to Turkey, it won't be for the reason you think. It will be for the part of me that never truly left.